y'all working so hard on your projects and then have to be physically, mentally, or emotionally affected by this more than you need to be. So that was the first point. The second point, personally, I really was going to read a lot of people for Phil because I've been very upset at how people misinterpret what it means to have respectful dialogue, especially with this Bill Maher debacle. Y'all probably really tired of hearing about it. I did send you all an email. Thank you for your encouragement on that point. But I wanted to say that when I first heard about Bill coming to campus, I really did not care because it didn't affect me. And then as time went on and I became more of an ally to the affected communities, I signed a petition and I thought I should help in whatever way I can because it's not my space to tell people that they should not feel marginalized by this man coming to campus. And then, of course, administration did that thing they do where they don't listen to students. And as a student at large, I was very offended and appalled and disgusted by that. So I became more involved and attended the town hall, which a lot of you, some of you attended, so thank you for that. And then as time went on, and senators made this into more of a personal issue and became personally attacked by vicious individuals who think they have a place in this conversation, I became very upset because my way of thinking is, probably take my paper. My way of thinking is that, it's no one's place to tell anyone what their struggles are, and for anyone to use their privilege to come in and try to beat down these people and silence their voices is not only offensive, it is destructive to the conversation. And to those people, I kindly show them the door, because this isn't a conversation to be had, and if they're not here to help the cause, they really shouldn't be speaking at all, is in my opinion, especially because they are not marginalized people typically. They're usually white men who are heterosexual, who really, for some reason, think it's their place to tell people of color or Muslims or women that they aren't actually being oppressed, which I thought was quite hilarious because it's not their place. And then they try to flaunt it and disguise it as humor or comedy when really it's not. It's actually disgusting and gross. Then I'll tell you this, I'm fed up with people who cannot even begin to understand the nature of my struggle, so I feel like I can sympathize with a lot of students who are in an uproar about this. I hate when people tell me to sit down and shut up or that my voice is illegitimate, and I'll be damned if I let anyone do that to my fellow senators, to my friends, to my peers. Who are busting their asses to represent marginalized peoples. And it's such a shame that Miriam's not here right now because I wanted to thank her personally for spearheading this. And I wanted to thank those of you who've come under fire for having the audacity to speak about the very real oppression faced by students of this university. That is...
Motion to extend by two.
Second.
Any objections? Motion passes by unanimous.
That is what it means to work on campus climate. That is what it means to be a senator at large, and that is what it looks like when you're doing your job. To the rest of you who have allowed inaction to keep you rooted to your comfortable seats above the fray, I kindly encourage you to educate yourselves and to stop wasting time by being mired in pettiness, whatever that looks like. You really only have a couple months left to affect the change that y'all, dedicated yourself. Hello, Mary.
Sorry, we were up for
It's okay. So, yeah, you only have a couple months to affect change, so please use your time wisely. To recap, I want to thank Miriam for spearheading this Bill Maher thing. So thank you. Can you clap for Miriam?
Next comment is from Eric Michaels. Cool. Then we're going to move on to guests. First guest report is from the ASUC Student Union for 5 minutes and 5 minutes for questions.
Good evening, senators and guests. So I have a couple, 2 pages, so it's not too long, regarding updates from the ASUC Student Union. Program service updates. The Green Initiative Fund, TGIF, had a successful Nature Village bike ride on Sunday, leading University Village families on a bike ride to Point Isabel, following the educational demonstration from our student bike co-op, ASUC. We invite you to check out 2 of the new series from the CERC blog, Local Bites, weekly articles on local food, and the CERC blog video series, which can be found on the CERC website. The fraternity and sorority team within the Lead Center are partnering with Senator Grant Ginsky to host an LGBT Greek and Allies social on Sunday, November 16th. Construction facilities updates. Glass walls are up on the 2nd floor of MLK, and the exterior stairs are in place at the lower sprout side of MLK. The view is great from the renovated Chavez South balcony. So there will be loud demolition noise at the Cesar Chavez breezeway and across from the entities of the lower sprout level of South Chavez. So just as a heads up, you may want to let anyone know that uses that space, that information. The regional solar effort has been adopted by campus and is moving forward. The old panels have been removed from MLK roof and will be recycled. The new panels for MLK and Eshelman are scheduled for March 2015 installed. Staffing and hiring update from the ASUC Student Union. Event Services completed our search for event coordinator. Jason Curley was selected, and we're excited for him to join. And you can find him. He was sitting in RSSP on the 3rd floor with the Event Services team. TGIF is hiring a Nature Village Program associate to work on our Sustainability Family Living Program at University Village. The Associate Director in the Lead Center for Student Government Advising and Leadership Programs committee is meeting this week to review and finalize candidates. They're expected to meet again to determine on-campus interview candidates before the winter break. A student staff update. So anyone you know looking for a position, the facilities team and the student union are still looking for a couple of awesome students for facility specialist positions within facilities maintenance and operations. These positions can be found on CoStuff. Some upcoming events. Words of the Watershed, the CERC-sponsored literary journal of local environmental writing, will be hosting a Sunday soiree this Sunday at the 9th at the Student Organic Garden from 3 to 6. CERC will also be running a screening of Planet This Movie next Wednesday, 11/12 at 7 p.m. and 159 Mulford. The film features UC Berkeley professors, and the screening will include a question and answer about the movie. Again, it's on the 12th at 7 p.m. in Mulford. A few last updates. The fraternity and sorority team in the Lead Center tonight are at a couple of things. Elections for IFC are happening right now today. The new executive board will take place January 1st, 2015. On a very sad note, I think a few senators mentioned the memorial service for Zachary Bradley, a member of Theta Delta Chi, TDX, is happening tonight right now in Unit 1 APR. The fraternity is currently collecting donations to help with the costs associated with Zach's passing. The Willow program has been a steady success and over 1,000 users last week and over 80 reservations, which is a huge increase for that program. ASUC Student Union Marketing, Joel Felix and Amanda Blauvelt won 5 awards at the ASUY Still This Ideal Marketing Competition for campaigns for Earth Week, Spring Budgeting, CERC, Food Pantry, and Callaway. And a debate update, our young debate team competed at Harvard University and tied for 5th place in the toughest tournaments of the season. Mimi Sargent Leventhal and John Spurlock won speaker awards for their efforts, and those are 2 students on the debate team. So before I go, I know I mentioned the memorial. I was wondering if it was okay if I could engage you all in a quick moment of silence for Zachary Bradley as a member of this community. So if we could please take a quick moment to reflect. All right, thank you all for your time this evening.
So a question for the ASUC Student
Is there any update as to when Eshelman will open up for next year? Much about a date?
Not a specific date. We're still working on the fall 2015. And so we have not, based off construction, we don't have an official date yet. But they are on track for fall 2015.
Any other questions? Is there a place where we can find all of these announcements? I know it's really late in the semester to ask, but all these announcements like written down?
Yes, we actually have a folder that we keep these in, so I can try to figure out how you all would like that shared. But yeah, it has been for the whole year, so we can figure out if we just want to share that with you each individually. If there's a folder, a Google folder that you all have, we can get them to you.
Thank you.
No problem.
Any other questions? Thank you.
All right, thanks.
Our next guests are Nils Gilman and Daniel Gillum in the Chancellor's office.
So let me say thank you for inviting us. I'll introduce myself. My name is Nils Gelman. I'm the Chief of Staff to the Chancellor and also the Associate Chancellor here.
I'm Dan Mogloff, Assistant Vice Chancellor from Public Affairs, and probably Nils will do most of the talking, but there have been a few issues that I've been involved in and may be able to fill in, depending on your questions. But thanks for having us.
So I'll make my introductory remarks short. Originally, Pavan asked me to come down and talk about the Berkeley Global Campus. But since the invitation came out, the Maher kerfuffle has erupted. I want to speak a little bit to that, especially given the passionate word we just had about this. I think the first thing to be said is that the Chancellor, specifically the administration in general, is very aware that there are a lot of people who are upset about the situation with Maher coming here to speak at the graduation ceremony in December. And he acknowledges, and we acknowledge, that a lot of good reasons for people to feel a sense of grievance around that. When the decision was made by the Californians, they wished to rescind the invitation, however, has put the administration in something of a tricky spot. Because on the one hand, we cherish and put a lot of value in having a community where people feel welcome and not disrespected. On the other hand, we value the importance of honoring our commitments and our commitment to free speech specifically. And there's many occasions in which you have to engage in a balancing test between different kinds of values that may be in competition at specific moments. And we felt that this was a case like that. And we went through a considered process of thinking about how we can manage this. So the Chancellor has decided that, invitations go out, we shouldn't disinvite people from things that have been invited. This was a student decision initially, but it went out over the Chancellor's signature, and it became an administration responsibility to safeguard the importance and the value of honoring the commitments that we make, and we want to do that in partnership with the students. Now, with all that said, I think it's really important to understand two things. First of all, the Chancellor has already met with the Student Regent to talk about this specifically. The Chancellor will welcome opportunities to personally speak with other students about this. And furthermore, we're happy to host an open conversation about this. Bill Maher himself has offered to come back and not just speak at graduation, but come back and speak to students specifically on another occasion, engage in a dialogue. If people want to do that, if people are interested in that, we can work on setting that up. I'm happy to take questions on that.
I just want to add a few more words about this. The Chancellor is away, he's overseas, but there are a couple of other things that he wanted to convey and make sure we conveyed to him. So beyond the fact that he's acutely aware about how difficult and painful this has been, particularly for students, Muslim students, who suffer from stereotype threat on a daily basis, he wants to make sure that students understand he will now and will continue to support your right to have your voices heard around this issue, to speak up, and if need be, to protest, so long as this happens within the context of our community, principles of community, and the time, place, and manner rules which have served this campus in good stead for decades. But that is the Chancellor will be reaching out when he gets back, and as Neil said. And I also want to point out, so we know there's a bill before the Senate, and I would imagine that you will face some of the same difficult considerations and reflections that the Chancellor did. In the context of your own Constitution, it says, I believe, the ASUC shall pass no law restricting the freedom of speech. These are tough issues, and we've had a tough time with this. But at the end of the day, not just that the invitation was made and commitments were made, but it went to the core of who we are. Just as I would imagine when you consider this bill, you will consider what you stand for. Reasonable, this is an issue I believe, and the Chancellor believes, is one that reasonable people can disagree about. And so I think going forward, the key will be how we engage and discuss this with each other in a respectful and a constructive manner, because I don't think anybody wants to see a repeat performance of this.
So can I ask a quick question about how you'd like to proceed? We can either take questions on this, or I can talk more about the Berkeley Global Campus and save questions for the end. I would prefer that I proceed.
Let's take a temperature check. For folks who want to go into questions, please raise your hand. That seems like a majority. So we can take questions. So questions for the Chancellor. Let's do Senator Reed and Board Members.
Good evening. Thank you very much for coming. I really appreciate it. One concern that I do have is that there are some students that have expressed the concern that they were not involved in the process, and I want to know if the Chancellor or any of you have followed up with these students and talked to them about it, because according to them, they were not involved in choosing the speaker, and that's really, I think, a very important detail that I think we all need to work together to figure out what is the truth behind that, and that's one of the largest concerns that we all have. So can you please speak to that?
Absolutely. So the initial nomination or proposal to have Mara speak came from the Californians, which is a student nominated group. I'm not actually exactly sure on the appointment procedure, whether it's an election or whatnot, but it's a student group. Went out over the Chancellor's signature. Chancellor deferred the students' initial choice on this matter. Then the same group decided they wanted to rescind the invitation. At that point, the Chancellor felt that it had gone out over his signature, and the decision at that point to rescind the invitation rested with the administration. In terms of further consultation with students, we are meeting with a set of students who are on the Californians, I believe next Friday. That is not 2 days from now, but 9 days from now. So there is continued engagement on that. What I can't speak to is how representative that group may be of the general population of students at large at Berkeley. Like any representative body, as I'm sure you understand, you represent people as well as you can, but you also represent constituencies, and I'm sure it's the same with them.
Senator, I just want to add one thing. Based on what I've heard and understand, that the initial process by which the invitation was extended may not have involved all of the students on the Californians. It appears that the process itself was, the details of the process was not known or fully understood by all of the Californians. And I think that we could probably spend a long time trying to pick apart what went wrong in this process. I think it's far more constructive that we come together and engage and find out and figure out a better process that does us all right. But there's a lot of confusion. I can say categorically that at least some of the students from the Californians were the ones who made the decision. Whether or not they engaged all of their peers, I think is another question that they can answer.
Thank you again for coming. So I have a lot of questions, but I'll start with this one. How are you working to protect the students at commencement from hate speech? And what are you doing to address the concerns of students, specifically graduating in the winter, who feel that their graduation commencement is going to be ruined?
In terms of protections, two things. One is we are, as Dan alluded to a moment ago, certainly creating a space, as we always do, for people to voice their dissent or even protest if they so wish. So people shouldn't feel that they are being silenced. They're certainly not being silenced. In fact, we encourage people to speak out on this issue. So insofar as the concern has to do with silencing, we will do everything we can to make sure that everybody feels that they have a space where they can articulate their positions on these issues. As always, the Chancellor encourages people to express themselves with civility, and will continue to do so.
Thank you again, both of you, for coming. Given your acknowledgement of that fact and your understanding of the problem, I'd like you to elaborate on your logic about why rescinding the invitation isn't the right way to go. And I'd also like for you to elaborate on the fact that this might be a logistical problem about finding another speaker, and to say like what, I don't know, to basically elaborate on why rescinding this invitation is not the right way to do it.
So part of it is about a matter of being polite. I don't know how else to put it. When you invite people, you don't disinvite them because some other people at the party don't enjoy the company of them. But furthermore, beyond that, specific grounds on which students are asking them to be disinvited, not just students but others as well, strike us as being directly in conflict with a different value on this campus, and another value which is also deeply cherished, which is the value of free speech. And that makes it a choice that is very difficult. I mean, if people were protesting for any number of other reasons, it might be more conceivable. But in general, the fact that the specific complaint has to do with the nature of the content of this speech makes it very difficult for us to find grounds to do that.
I just want to fill in just a few other thoughts. I think the other question for all of us is, where does it stop? And how do you draw the lines? So the next time we have a speaker, and the speaker says something that's perceived to be offensive, and I don't want to suggest for a minute that Mr. Marr's comments were not extremely offensive to many people on this campus. It's not what I'm talking about at the moment. I'm not standing here to defend him. Nobody from the Chancellor's office will do that. Nobody from the administration would. But I would ask all of you to think what kind of precedent gets set the next time a speaker comes and a particular group is upset by what they say. Does that decision get rescinded? When a water saving advocate comes and talks about the need to shut down California agriculture, and all the students who grew up on farms feel offended he's threatening their way of life. And I'm exaggerating here for a reason. But I think you can see it leads nowhere good. Free speech, and to stand up for free speech in this day and age of polarization and issues that strike us to the core of who we are, is not an easy value to protect and defend. And there's a cost to it. And we're feeling that cost right now, all of us collectively. If it was easy, there wouldn't need to be a constitutional amendment protecting it. If it was easy, we wouldn't be having these debates. And in some ways, and I don't want to put on rose-colored glasses, this issue and this debate, nothing could be more fitting than for the 50th anniversary of the free speech movement. Because until now, it's been a slogan, free speech. But now we're living it, and we're seeing that it's not as simple and clear-cut all the time. And there's always room for second-guessing. Because quite often speech is disturbing, is upsetting, is sometimes hateful. And when that plays out in the context of a college campus that's as diverse as this one, it's a complicated issue. So at the end of the day, the Chancellor came down in support of one of the things that has defined this institution and will continue to define it, we hope and expect and believe, for decades, centuries to come. But sometimes to defend it puts everyone in an uncomfortable and difficult position.
Thank you for coming. With all due respect, I find it kind of ironic that y'all are throwing free speech into the mix about this. Students on this campus feel unsafe, and in light of the diversity and climate issues that exist on our campus every day, to say that and throw that out is as if it's an excuse to compare this to a party in which guests don't feel welcome, that's infuriating. As a woman, as an ally to Muslims on this campus, like, it's a bigger deal than just extending an invitation and uninviting you because it's rude. Students who have the biggest stake at the table, yes, we're here for 4 years, I'm baffled that the excuse is that it looks rude. Putting him on a pedestal, the way he talked about our school Friday night, for me it's a no-brainer. I'm sorry if I'm coming off at all. I mean, let's throw free speech back at this, right? But hate speech and free speech are very different. And for students to feel physically uncomfortable, and this has further reinforced climate issues. We've been getting regular emails from students that are pretty threatening. Senators sitting around this table get threatening emails regularly from students on this campus. So reinforcing this issue of protecting free speech through hate speech is just not an answer for me. And I'm sorry this is less of a question and more of a comment, but like, I'm sorry, I'm very disappointed in what the Chancellor's office has to say as an answer to us.
So, thank you for your comment.
I just wanted to say one issue on the matter of safety. I understand the perception and the feeling, but I hope there's not any doubt that this administration and this university is going to do what's necessary to make sure that all students are and remain safe. I understand that some of the comments create that feeling of uncertainty and can lead to feelings of feeling unsafe. But let's be clear, there will be no physical threat. We will not allow for that. That's number one. Number two is I think we've all, for all of you who've been on this campus who didn't just arrive this year, there have been more than a few demonstrations and protests on this campus that have made one student group or another extremely uncomfortable. And we have stood up for the right of those groups to express their opinions and perspectives, even in the context of other student groups feeling deeply uncomfortable by some of the rhetoric that's used. And so again, I talked about where does this lead if we establish that precedent? If that is the trigger for actions that students feel uncomfortable, where does that end? Because I've known personally, and to speak about letters, I've seen the letters, we've received the letters from a whole variety of student groups. Undocumented immigrants, Jewish students, Palestinian students, students of color, LGBTQ students. At one time or another in my 10 years here, I've seen letters from them. What do we tell them if we begin to go down the road that you're suggesting? I don't have an answer for it, but I'm asking that we think about it collectively.
I'd like to understand motion to extend time to 5 minutes.
So moved. Second.
Any objections? Motion passes by unanimous consent. Senator Levy.
I think that this is a larger debate that I would love to have personally with both of you. And I see that we are clearly we have different opinions. I wanted to talk about that much longer, but my question has to do with the fact that when I spoke to the Chancellor on Thursday, my main concern was that in the statement that you all released, by not even mentioning once the concerns of students, you completely delegitimized every single concern that you brought up. And right now you're standing in front of us saying that you think that our concerns are valid. So my concern is that, or my question is, why hasn't the administration released a statement saying that, fine, you will bring Bill Maher, you're going to welcome him, but why haven't you said anything or even acknowledged that campus climate is an issue, that Muslim students are targeted, that women are targeted? And I told the Chancellor this, and he said that he would drop the statement that day and release it publicly. I haven't seen a statement yet. And I'm asking where that statement is.
So first of all, thank you. I actually want to respond to the previous comment briefly, which is that the line between hate speech and free speech is a very contested one. It's very contested in jurisprudence. It's very contested intellectually. I think that even people who feel very strongly about hate speech can acknowledge that it's difficult to draw the lines between those things. Second of all, on the issue of the chancellor giving a statement, he will be giving a statement. It's actually something that we're trying to make sure will actually meet the acknowledgments that you richly deserve. I think the reason why I wanted to address this issue first thing is because the reason why I'm here to discuss this today is to specifically let you know that the administration takes your concerns extremely seriously. And not just that we take it seriously, but we understand why you feel that way. To echo what Dan was saying earlier, the test of free speech is whether you tolerate speech that you find odious. That is what the definition of it is. And so we can say that something is odious and still say that we're going to allow it to be spoken. The point here is that things that make us uncomfortable and things that make us feel unsafe, we should not conflate those things. If somebody is threatening you physically, that's totally unacceptable. It's not protected speech. Yelling fire in a crowded theater, there's lots of Supreme Court jurisprudence on this issue. When people say things that we don't like to hear because we find them offensive, because we find them rude, those are things that are protected. And the test of whether we respect that protection is whether we can tolerate it when somebody says things that we find horrific.
Thank you all for coming. My question kind of lies in this understanding of this physical violence that we all understand won't happen. But there is a mental violence that happens, and there is a violence that happens from being who we are. As a person who's Black, I deal with racist comments on daily basis from doctors, from students, from administrators. I sit in it, I do it, yeah, that's free speech. But at what point does the university draw the line and then allow someone who nationally has a show in which allows for that hate to go on and come to this campus and then speak on behalf of students in which this speaker nationally throws satire towards, elaborates on stereotypes, and then expect students like us who go through these injustices on a daily basis to sit and listen and be like, oh yes, this is the man I want to listen to on one of the happiest days of my life. So the issue for me is not free speech, but a matter of how does this university that sat on this campus climate issue, that's been the exact same campus climate issue that's been around since the last survey in 2008, the last survey they're the same results, yet everything's been done, but every couple of years that I know of, there's been a speaker, whether it's Mr. Farrakhan or it's Bill Maher, there's always a speaker that the university will act on and others that they will sit quiet about. And so at what point does the university decide to step up for the students who've been recurring the same issues for years and years and years and expect us to come here and want to be here and want to participate in graduation and campus when you nationally allow for this type of speech to be made and not say anything in our defense. So I'm not coming, but it's a matter of you all not admitting that there is an issue, but rather just ignoring the issue for the sake of publicity. So what does that do for us, and how are you addressing that?
So a couple things to be said. I don't think there's anybody in this administration that is denying that there's many challenges associated with the campus climate, and that those things are things that have to be dealt with at a structural level. They're hard to change. And that doesn't make it right. It doesn't mean that there hasn't been, it doesn't need to continue to be a huge effort around those things. The second thing I would say is that I don't think anybody thinks that Bill Maher is coming to speak for the students. He may be coming to speak at the students or to the students, but there's going to be, and this is not about him, this is just about what graduation speakers do. They get up and they give a speech about, whatever pearls of wisdom they see fit to bestow upon the students. And nobody thinks that they're somehow speaking on behalf of the students. Nobody's going to think that Bill Maher comes here and gives an offensive speech or gives a totally boring speech. This is going to have any reflection on you as individuals. And that's not about him, this is about any speaker at a graduation ceremony. So I hope that, that is not something that you're going to sort of feel like he represents Berkeley. He's just an invited speaker at graduation. I just want to go back and say, though, that, the campus climate issues are very severe. I think we made some progress over the last few years. There's a long way to go though, and those things happen not just at the level of students. It has to do with environment in the classroom, faculty, staff, and all of those issues are being addressed, but they're structural and they take time to change.
Yes.
Thank you for coming. So my question is, while free speech is encouraged, shouldn't the commencement specifically be a time when hate speech is not tolerated? That is, I believe that he should be able to talk at Berkeley, but I feel that commencement should be a time where we really should have the best interests of all students above all else, and this is something that can really make a lot of students uncomfortable. And secondly, we said that we didn't want to seem rude by rescinding the invitation, but to me it seems rude to how this makes all these students feel that we're consulted in this whole process.
Representative systems always lead themselves to those kinds of critiques, and they're legitimate. What I would say is that I don't know what Bill Maher is going to come here and speak about. My guess is that he will avoid any controversial topics. But I don't know. I mean, we'll see. And if he does say things that are controversial or horrific or offensive, I would hope that those people who feel that way would give him an earful. That would be representing what Berkeley's all about.
So I just want to add one thing. We have been in touch with his people. We conveyed to them in no uncertain terms that commencement is meant to be a ceremony, a celebration of accomplishment, not a venue for making a point, proving a point. They understand that completely. I believe he acknowledged that to some extent in the show on Friday. We intend to continue to have that dialogue. We have encouraged him to sit down with the Daily Cal and make more of his views known and face questioning, and he is considering that. We have encouraged and urged him to take time to meet with students, including yourselves specifically. I cited the Senate as a group he should meet with on the day when he comes, if you would be willing. No presumption there. But what I am saying in short is that you are absolutely right. In a perfect world, a provocative speaker, somebody who was famous, became famous because the provocative might not have been invited. I don't know. Was it given adequate thought? I'm not sure. I wasn't part of the process. But the fact that those who invited him seemed surprised that a provocateur said something provocative after the invitation, make of that what you will. But having said that, I want to assure you that we're going to do everything in our power to make sure that he understands and continues to understand that this is a very special day for the people involved. And it would be a damn shame if it's used to extend this particular debate and discussion as opposed to something that's far more fitting and appropriate for the occasion. We're going to do our best on that. I believe they understand it. Our initial conversations with them have been encouraging on that.
Can I get a chance to show how many people are on set? Okay, I'd like to entertain a motion to extend the time of 10 minutes.
Second.
Are there any objections? Motion passes by unanimous consent. Could I get the hands of people who haven't spoken? Let's go with Senator Malcolm and Joel.
So, just in summary, I think it's important to understand that we do support the right to speak on campus, but not the privilege of the commencement. And personally, I want to offer, I guess, some more actionable items on that. How can we help you to create that dialogue on campus? You said at the beginning when you came in that you were willing to come in and speak with students about this in an open dialogue. How can we help make that happen outside of the commencement?
We will absolutely encourage him to do that. If you guys can make yourselves available either as a group here as senators or perhaps to identify a representative group of students who have particularly strong and articulate feelings on this point, we will endeavor to make that dialogue happen.
I would actually humbly suggest that if the Senate were to create some sort of invitation, something that we could pass along, something that would be hard to say no to, I would be happy either to let you know how to get it into his hands or to do that myself. But I think that we have a shared responsibility to try to make this happen and that you can be helpful in that regard.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Senator Jarrell.
Thank you for coming. One of my biggest concerns was that you mentioned that you guess he might not say something, or you guess he might say something that you do not know. So I guess the logistical question I have is there any contract that is going to be signed in terms of this invitation? If there has, what does that entail? And is there any way to speak more of a direct way to ensure that there is no talk of hate speech when Bill is to speak at this commencement?
So I don't know that is there a contract? I'm not aware that there's a contract. I don't even, it's not getting paid.
No,
there's no money involved. Sometimes people get paid for doing these kinds of things, he's not being paid. We don't normally try to pre-vet the speeches that get given on this campus on any topic. That would be somewhat unprecedented, and you can see why that might be a problem for a variety of reasons. If the administration decided to systematically either ourselves vet and approve of people's speech, or to assign people to vet such speech, or delegate such things, all of those things would be chilling to a variety of different kinds of audiences. So I don't know that we can really do that. With that said, I think to Dan's point, we do have an open dialogue with his people, and we are doing everything we can to encourage them to take a positive tone that's not going to further exacerbate people's discontent with him.
Let's go with Senator Lee regarding the next speech session.
I have two logistical questions. Number one, can you please give us a date of when the statement will be released, and can you please make sure that we all have the opportunity to see it, since the purpose of the statement is to legitimize the student voice and all the concerns that we brought up regarding campus climate. And then secondly, my question is, you all said that you will be working on a change of policy and process with this, and I want to make sure that you understand that this would not have happened if our voices were a part of it. And I really, really would love to sit down and talk to you all and discuss what kind of system can we create to make sure that ASUC is involved directly in choosing the commencement speaker, as well as in conjunction with the chancellor. And in terms and answering the question of where the Californians fit in as well. So just those two logistical questions.
In terms of when a statement is going to be released, we don't have a specific date for that. We're trying to get it done. The chancellor is traveling. He's in Asia right now, and it's difficult for me to have an active dialogue with him about it when he's in airplanes between India and China, as he literally is at this minute. So there's a logistical thing in terms of our ability to get that out. I don't want to make a promise, but we want to do it soon. In terms of the selection process, I think everybody involved at this point would agree that the process that we had didn't work very well. I know that when the chancellor first learned about this process, he was surprised that this was something that had been delegated to the student group, the Californians. But he decided to defer. He's new here, relatively speaking. He decided to defer to the campus tradition around this. There's many, many campus traditions, and it would be foolish for somebody to come in from the outside just to start saying, no, I'm going to change this, I'm going to change this. So he decided to defer to the existing process. I don't know the origin of either this group called the Californians or how they earned the privilege of selecting the graduation speakers. We're going to actively reconsider what that process is. In dialogue initially with them, you can imagine there's some bruised feelings in that group right now. We definitely want to be able to provide more oversight to that process as well. Not because we want to exercise control, but because we want to exercise some guidance. I think if more guidance had been given around this, we could have avoided this problem in the first place, instead of deferring to a group of students who maybe weren't even having a particularly effective dialogue amongst themselves, much less with the rest of the campus.
Okay, I'm going to address another few follow-up questions. So my first question is, would the Chancellor and the Chancellor's office ever consider, in the future now, disinviting Bill Maher from coming to speak at commencement?
No.
Okay. Then I want to say that the Chancellor has made a very clear decision to not support students. And we can like go back and forth, and I think Miriam hit on this point well, like we can keep having this conversation, but it's very clear to me, and I think it's very clear to a lot of people here, that this decision is not made for the students. Students don't feel protected. So I'm happy you're going to be releasing a statement. At the same time, it's going to take a lot more than that. The second question I have is do I hear a commitment from the Chancellor's office to include the ASUC in the future selection of commencement speakers?
So I think what there's a commitment to is to have a conversation with you all about what the process for selection of speakers should be in the future. We have not had a chance to have a dialogue yet about what that process should look like. There's a variety of different people that need to be consulted, and obviously students are central to that process. It's your graduation, and we wouldn't want to have this be something that, we don't want to have a selection process. On the other hand, the existing process resulted in a bunch of students selecting somebody who a bunch of other students are very upset by.
Sorry, I guess I didn't phrase that clearly. Is there a commitment that heavy student voice involvement will be a part of the selection process in the future? So not a small subset, but a large subset of students.
Well, what I can say is there's a problem of representativeness, and one advantage of the ASUC is that you guys are an elected student body with standing as a representative body. But the question that we want to figure out is what the process should be for having a dialogue with multiple groups on campus. Because part of what this story revealed is that, obviously, and we know this on many other issues like, Israel-Palestine issues, there's not one student voice, there's not one we that can be clearly articulated. We are a multifarious campus, and the students reflect the diversity of the state and the political opinions of this country more generally. So what we need to do is we need to have a process that somehow managed to capture all of that. What I worry about, frankly, and I haven't had a chance to talk to the Chancellor about what he thinks the process should be, what we don't want is to have somebody who's going to please everybody every single time. Because people like that, there's only one word for them, that is boring. All right, somebody who would literally offend absolutely no one at this campus, none of the 27,000 students. Can you imagine how boring that person would have to be? And do you want to have to sit there in your black robe in the hot sun for an hour and listen to that person? I think it's okay to have somebody who says something occasionally provocative. What we don't want is somebody who says things that really offend large sections of the student body. That's a problem, and we want to make sure that that doesn't happen again in the future.
Okay, my last comment is just I would need to see an announcement from the Chancellor's office that now commencement speakers will only be chosen by a subset of the administration without taking into consideration adequately student voice, because I think that really actually relates to all of the problems.
I think that what we need is a process where there's a more active process of collaboration and advising, frankly. As I say, I can't imagine we would go to a process where we've selected these speakers on our own. Frankly, we wouldn't want the responsibility by ourselves. We would want students to feel like they have a voice in this. I think the problem here is we swung too far in the other direction.
Senator Berkeley?
So I really didn't want to think about what I said after that. I've had that hypothetical posed to me actually by one of my friends. Where does it stop? And all I'll say is it stops where you want it to stop. And it stops when the administration decides that it will take into account many values, and then it'll say that it values equity and inclusion over freedom of speech. And that's the decision that you have before you. And I really do want to pose that question to you. How do you reconcile that?
So I don't think it's possible in the abstract to choose any one of those things. I think you have to look at particular cases. Those are both values that are central to what this campus is all about. Free speech is central to what we're all about. Equity and inclusion, and having a true public university that creates opportunities for inclusion, dialogue, social mobility, that is absolutely central to our identity as well. And I don't think any of us would want, certainly not the administration, or even any of our fellow students, to sit up here and say, oh, one of these values every single time trumps the other value. We have to have balancing tests, we have to look at particular cases.
So as a follow-up, you have chosen in this case the value that you value most, freedom of speech.
Could you repeat that?
So in this case, you would state that the value chosen is freedom of speech.
I wouldn't say that at all, actually, because I think that our commitment to equity and inclusion has not been undermined at all by this decision. We are talking about an individual who's external to this campus, who will be here for a few hours at best and will leave. And when he leaves, he will leave behind hundreds, thousands of administrators, thousands of students who remain committed to all of those values. That commitment has not been undermined to the slightest extent by what's going on with this commencement speaker. Could it have been handled better? You bet. Is there a process that would have resulted in is there a better process out there for us? You bet. It is a false choice, I believe, to say that we can either have one or the other. And in fact, this institution is living proof of that fact. That doesn't mean it's not going to be hard sometimes. And it doesn't mean that we're not going to hit bumps in the road. And it doesn't mean that we're not going to have gut checks. I believe this body, you, the senators, will face a similar issue, again, as I said in the beginning, of reconciling the bill with your Constitution. That'll be a hard call. But I believe you will be able to do both. You will be able to pass a bill and adhere to your Constitution. In the same way that we will continue to hold dear to those values that define this institution. Let me say one other thing. It's no accident that a great university embraces, to the extent that we have and will continue and always have, the ideal of free speech. Because without that, what is academic freedom? What is the free exchange of ideas? What does all that mean? So yes, it's easy to say it stops when we want it to stop. That's not what history teaches us. History teaches us that sometimes you have to draw a bright, sharp line and then be willing to pay the price for it. But gosh darn it, I don't think there's anybody who thinks that because we made that decision, we're stepping back even an inch from our commitment to equity and inclusion. Those things are all possible, and we continue to believe that. Call us naive, but we continue to believe it.
Could I get a show of hands for remaining comments after this entire session? Okay, so I'll let's entertain a motion to some time. Just the 10 minutes.
You make this a hard 10 minutes. I would just like to start off by just saying that the values of the university is free speech. The E and I, the professor as a whole, are all student thoughtful and student protected, and I think that historically speaking, it's always been students who push for something without even pushing back, and then finally giving in and reclaiming it later. I think this is also really important. And so I just want that to be very clear that has always been student-led, and that the principle of this university has always been to kind of push back on those radical views that students then often have. But my question is, with this whole idea of the dialogue, when do we see this dialogue happening with the Chancellor's office and whether it's the ASUC or these students that we speak of happening, just because we say when it happens, and I would like to know when that will be. And also, I would like to just emphasize that a commencement speaker should be someone who's inspirational. It doesn't have to say anything provocative, because they're inspiring us on how they got from where they were to where they are. And any claim of anything provocative that they've done should not be a reflection of what then happens at commencement, because that is the time of inspirational speaking for the students. And so with that being said, I don't think that's necessary. So my question again, when will this dialogue happen with these students that we speak of?
I would humbly submit it's happening right now. But I'm happy to continue this dialogue. We can go on probably all night right now with the reference. But if what you're looking for is a conversation with the Chancellor specifically, is that what you're looking for?
With the Chancellor or the office, just an idea of like setting up the policies and the procedures then foresee who we decide to bring onto this campus.
Oh, right, okay. So there's going to be an initial conversation, as I mentioned, next Friday, 9 days from now, with some of the students from the Californians. I think they want to get some of their own thoughts off their chests on this issue, and they want to be heard, and we definitely want to hear them about what they think has happened here. I think after that, we definitely want to think about what a better process would be so we don't end up in a situation like this in the future. I don't have a timetable for that, but I can promise you it will be before the spring selection of the spring speaker. We will have new policy in place. So I don't know when our deadline is. Probably January, February to find a speaker. We gotta have a new process in place by that.
And then just a really quick follow-up. Can we make sure when that conversation happens, it doesn't happen when the students are on winter break, and ensure that we're all here?
Definitely.
Thank you.
Probably been tired sitting up there. Just piggybacking off what Senator Desi was saying, a lot of decisions that are made that are supposed to be made in conjunction with the administration and students are made behind closed doors without a lot of student input. And I'm just wondering, what can we do to further collaboration with y'all? Because Kathy Caution said it herself at a lunch with me, that she did not think that a student should sit on the undergraduate initiative from the ASUC because we do not represent the student body. Now, you yourself said we were elected, she said that, you yourself said that we were elected to represent the students, so I'm wondering how we can be better representative, more accurately represent the students than just the administrators making these decisions. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does make sense. So it's hard for me to answer that question though in the general sense, because there's many different topics which we seek to. Well, there are many decisions that have to be made that affect undergraduate life at this university. Almost all of them are ones that are really important to have student voices heard on. You all know what you need and want, in many cases, better than anybody else can. So we always try to solicit student information on the specific issue of the undergraduate issue. There is
Now there is. To clarify, now there is. In the beginning of this school year, there wasn't.
There was one meeting where the faculty wanted to talk amongst themselves.
I'm just quoting a conversation I had in which she said, "Oh, we don't really know yet. Maybe in the future we'll have it." But I'm moving away from that because now you're right, there is. I'm just wondering, I don't want, as Senator Gordon expressed, I feel like a lot of this is going blame to the Californians. But the speaker was chosen before the Californians got back to school in August, and no one has mentioned that yet. So I'm just wondering, Madison, can you elaborate on that, maybe? Yeah.
I'm sure the Californians have brought this up to you or in other meetings, but I think some of the reasons they feel so upset, or I'm sure a lot of things they're going to talk about in 9 days, are that when they came back in August, their normal selection process was streamlined because someone in university relations had told students of the Californians that Bill Maher was already going to be the commencement speaker. Now, whether the Californians and university relations then proceeded together to invite him, I don't know. But the fact does remain that university relations had a big role in selecting Bill, and we can see that the usual Californian process was not upheld in August because we do not have any backup speakers in ways that we have had in past years.
Senator, if you're looking for someone to stand up and defend the process that resulted in the decision about which we're speaking, you're not going to find it here on the stage. And I'm not sure how productive it is to continue to rehash what happened in August. Neither of us were involved. I think we've made clear that nobody in the Chancellor's office or the Chancellor himself are happy with the process and that we need to change it. I would just say that I've heard a lot of different things from people who are part of the Californians. Some of them were, I don't know how to describe it, completely contrary to what they had written in emails. It wasn't pretty. And I would to be upset and to raise these questions. We are unable to answer them. What we can answer and repeat is our determination and commitment to work with you to come up with a better process. But we're not going to stand here and defend what went on or to get into the minutiae of who said what to whom and when, because there's a lot of disparity of how that's being portrayed by those who were involved. It's unfortunate.
Senator,
Hi. Just from listening to various senators talking and getting the temperature check from you all. I remember earlier, if I didn't hear wrong, you said that there would be a chance that we could talk to Mr. Marr on the day of, or that was something that's talked of. And I think for myself, just personally, someone that has been offended by some of his comments, that's something I would like to challenge him on. And I think that if it's there are some senators missing tonight for reasons, and I'd like for us to talk as a Senate class, and maybe all of us 20 sit down with him. I think that is an action step if he will be speaking at the ceremony. I think we should have the time, since our voices were not heard, to speak with him if that's possible. If we could just allow him.
Yes, thank you, Senator. I just want to reiterate that if you're to formulate an invitation, we'll be happy to either facilitate its conveyance to Mr. Marr or do that ourselves. We have already conveyed that desire to him verbally. I did that on a phone call 2 days ago. We will continue to do that, and now we seek your help and collaboration to try to make that an invitation that would be hard to refuse.
Thank you.
any other comments before we move on? Senator Duffy, and then
Just before you all leave, I would like to ask that you update us on every single thing that you will be doing with this situation, because this is like the first time I've heard like a lot of these updates. And we all have constituents to answer to. We all have student groups to talk to. And frankly, it's really hard to tell them, I literally don't know what they're doing. I don't know what's going on, because they're doing everything behind closed doors, because they're going through back doors. So I'm asking you right now to please commit to updating us all on every single thing that like Marr is agreeing to. And from my understanding, you're trying to get him to do different things. There's a lot of different options. I would like to know those options. And if you don't want to make that public, I mean, that's another issue, but like, please keep us in the loop of this conversation, because you have a PR issue with students right now. And this is an opportunity for you to make sure that your PR with students is still standing, whatever's left of it. But please keep us in those conversations, because that's the only way that we can guarantee that we'll be able to cooperate. That's all I'm asking.
We'll definitely keep you in the loop. That's a commitment.
I'm going to take one last question, Senator.
Hi, thank you so much for being here. I have two real quick questions, and they aren't about Lamar, actually. I do affirm everything that's been said, but two other things that are related to PR. So, about a week and a half ago, actually, there was an article in the Daily Cal that was published by Claire Holmes, and in it, certain students were called liars for their work on sexual assault on campus, saying that we are not working with the administration. And I was just wondering how that got through, how that happened to be the way that the university wants to represent the work that students are doing on this campus around sexual assault, how that became the way the university is responding to the work that's being done when we're trying to be this national model, and we're holding a national conference on moving beyond compliance, and yet in our Daily Cal, the newspaper, in a response to an article we're publishing, we are called liars. Just checking on that.
Senator, I'm a little chagrined to say I'm not familiar with the letter you're referring to. Having said that, Associate Vice Chancellor Holmes' email and phone number are listed in the directory, and I think she is probably the person who is best situated to address and respond to your concerns. I'm sorry, I'm just not certain of the content of that letter. I should probably be a more careful reader of the paper. But.
Just on that note, our main issue right now with what's happening
students' voices aren't being heard on it. And so when the Daily Cal, I know you haven't read it, when issues like that are coming out in the newspaper, it's just an affirmation that the university doesn't actually support the work that students are doing on this issue, and it is just about PR. So I know you don't know the specific issue, but it very much undermines all the work that has been done and will continue to be done.
There's massive substantive changes that have to be made. Students are absolutely leading the process on the sexual assault crisis, and I can say as an administration, we appreciate that, and we support it, and we want to continue to support it. I also have to admit I'm not sure about the article you're referring to. I was definitely going to scurry off and read it right away. But if there's a perception that the administration is not being supportive, that's itself a problem.
I just want to add one thing I'm a little afraid to admit this, as a PR guy, the best PR is good substance. Not spin, but authentic action and change. And I can tell you that even the PR people like myself, that has been our main piece of advice to the administration. We believe it's being handled. The students are too involved. The issue is too troubling and too real for us to be trying to spin our way out of this or to simply talk our way out of this. New positions have been created, people have been hired, new programs have been started, advisory groups have been formed with students. Is there more to do? You bet. But it would be extraordinarily disappointing if anybody left tonight thinking that anybody in this administration believes that we can do good PR for this place without having the substance to back it up. We need to walk the walk and talk the talk. And as far as I've seen, that's exactly what we're doing so far. Has it been perfect? Is it a complex subject? You bet. But we're not going to give up until we get it right. And so this isn't a matter of just doing things for show. We're too acutely aware that the Chancellor was too deeply moved by the stories that he heard personally from survivors. And he has laid down the law to the people who work for him that things need to change, and I think Nils is exactly right. Massive change is underway. More to be done, but I think we're off to the kind of start that you would want to see.
Just a really quick response to that. Thank you so much for saying that. And I am in all those conversations and have been for about 3 years now. And I'm on all the committees and the hiring. We're excited to have Monty here, but that's not enough. And it is PR to say that one position, one FTE, will fill the void that's been missing on our campus for so many years that has caused so many students to be filing federal complaints against the university, going to Sacramento, getting audit passed, etc. And then for us to come back to school over after summer and have the university have done a $30,000 PR campaign where we were provided with rape whistles instead of condoms for a sexual assault campaign. So I would love to agree with you, but there are still so many things that are missing that make me not completely trust this process. And I was in conversations this past Friday with Harry LeGrand and with Dean Greenwell and David Surratt, where I know that this is happening. I just came from the UCOP Task Force on Sexual Violence in Orange County. And yes, things are moving in the right direction. There's still huge voids where it is a PR issue and we can't trust it fully yet.
I don't disagree that things should be moving more quickly than they are. This is it's a vexing issue. Hardly a weekend goes by where there's not another incident. And we understand that when that happens, people bear those scars with them for the rest of their lives. And so we're very committed to this. The report goes out of reports of sexual assaults that gets distributed very broadly in the administration. There's a broad awareness that this is something we have to deal with. I can tell you that when we, at the university system-wide level, it's also something that gets dealt with explicitly. I'm new to this job. I've been here for 5 months, but when I went to my first meeting with my peers at other campuses, we spent half of our meeting going through a case study of how one of these incidents was handled at another campus to understand what the potential fall down points are, what the communication mechanisms are. It is something that we understand. We have to build up infrastructure, and it's not just about a matter of FTEs, it's a matter of changing the culture around the way in which the urgency with which this is addressed at I actually think that, I don't want to make, PR is not the solution by any means, but actually just continuing to have a conversation about this raises awareness, and I think changes the terms of debate, makes victims more likely to come forward and talk about their experiences, and not try to just hide it or get shamed in not talking about it. It brings awareness to potential perpetrators. It brings awareness to people who can intervene positively, that that's something they should be doing. So I do think it's good that we're having these dialogues. That doesn't mean that we don't need to make changes at the level of policy as well. We absolutely do. But I also do think that the conversation itself is part of the solution.
So that's all the time that we're going to allow for this guest speaker. So thank you.
One last word. If you do want me to come back and talk about the Berkeley Global Campus Service today, I'm happy to do that.
Our next guest is Al Katz, for 10 minutes and 5 minutes for questions. Centers at ease always set the projector. Senators, please return to your seats. And if we could have the discussions in the audience lower their volume a little bit for our guest presentation, that would be great.
some updates on that front as well. So one thing I just want to mention, that the topic of this session is CalCap. CalCap stands for Cal's Climate Action Partnership. It's a partnership, we call it a partnership of faculty, staff, students, and administrators on the UC Berkeley campus. It formed in 2006 at the request of students. Students went to the then chancellor and said that the campus needed to pay more attention to our climate impacts from our campus operations. And from that formed CalCap. CalCap is still going strong. There's a steering committee. CalCap's functions and the kind of administration and management of the climate program for the operations does reside in our Office of Sustainability and Energy. And that is part of my work every day to think about it and act on it and implement it kind of on my behalf. Next slide. So some of you may have already heard that in last November, a year ago, President Napolitano announced that the UC system, the 10 UC campuses and the Office of the President, would be carbon neutral from our operations from what we call scopes 1 and 2. So in the operations for the Berkeley campus and all of the UC campuses, that means being carbon neutral, not emitting carbon emissions from the building energy use and from the fleet use that we use for university business. It does not encompass all of the emissions that are associated with our operations or that we track in our operations, particularly around transportation, life cycle analysis, various other things. So it's a strong initiative about carbon neutrality, but it does not encompass kind of the whole universe of emissions associated with the UC system. Thanks, next slide. So just for a perspective for the UC system, we do have a goal in place for 2020, and it's a much more modest goal that was set 6 years ago. And that was to take emissions levels down to 1990 levels by the year 2020. So it is an emissions reduction. And the chart that's on your left side shows the policy goal 2020 and actually where our emissions are right now as a UC system. And then the chart on the right shows that where we need to be for those two sources that I talked about by the year 2025 to be neutral. And that's about 1.2 million tons of carbon emissions that we have to reduce in the next 11 years as a system. So next slide. So what's going on at Berkeley? So I mentioned that there's the CalCap, the Cal Climate Action Partnership. After a feasibility study was done in the early years, the chancellor set a target, and our target for the Berkeley campus for our first reduction was to take our carbon emission levels down to 1990 levels by this year. So we wanted to hit that target 6 years ahead of the rest of the system, and we did it. When we looked at our emissions profile in 2012, it showed that we were actually below 1990 levels. So that was a great effort, and it was after a lot of thoughtful work and investment on the part of the campus to get us to that goal. So the things that we did to get to that goal, we've done a lot of energy efficiency around the campus, and we've started to look at renewable energy, and that's still the strategy we need to look at moving forward. Next slide. So what does that mean for us? How do we become carbon neutral in the next 11 years? We have to reduce our emissions on this campus from those energy sources by about 80% below 1990 levels. So it's most of our emissions that we have to do. And it's on the one hand exciting and from my perspective great that we have an ambitious goal to get there. And then this is also quite a challenge. So I think we need to be looking at it from all angles, and that's one of the things we're doing. What can we do on a campus level to accomplish this? And then what do we need to do as a system as a whole to accomplish this? So as I mentioned, reduction strategies. So really we focused in the early years of our efforts on energy efficiency. That's where we've gotten most of it, going into our buildings and tuning them up and changing lights out and doing retrofits and reducing the demand, and we still need to do that, still need to focus on that. But renewable energy is really where we're going to be, where we're going to accomplish it. And a large part of our emissions that we look at are from the electricity and the natural gas that we use to heat and cool the campus. And so we need to find viable, renewable sources for that. So what we're looking as a UC system as a whole to do that is to try and secure large amounts of biogas to replace the natural gas that's used, and also find ways to buy more renewable electricity. So there is some effort going on, which has been different in the past, a real more system-wide focus of what can we do as a system, as a the power of 10 to really make some moves in those markets and bring renewable energy. I think earlier it was mentioned that MLK and Eshelman is going to have solar panels on it. We are also looking on campus, what can we do? Where can we install solar? Where can we put solar thermal? What are our options? So in this next year, the Eshelman and MLK will probably be the first buildings to get the solar, and we're looking at 4 to 6 more locations in this year of buildings on campus. President Napolitano's carbon neutrality initiative, she wanted to put together kind of an advisory council. She is calling it the Global Climate Leadership Council. It has been pulled together. There's about 25 members on the council. There's representation from each of the 10 campuses, not in every position, but there is representation. There's faculty, there's students, there's staff, there's administrators from UCOP, and there are some external consultants as well from the outside that to give us additional perspective. And this group is just getting started now, but we're really focused on how do we engage our campus community to take action around carbon neutrality, how do we talk about applied research, how do we advance the research that we're doing on our campus and commercialize those kinds of projects that are going to move us forward. What are potential curriculums for students? What are learning outcomes that students should have when they're educated at UC and we have these kinds of initiatives? So there's a lot of really dynamic, interesting conversations starting to happen. So I wanted to kind of bring your attention to that. There are 2 students on the council. And I'm happy to connect you to them. There's an undergraduate student from Davis and a graduate student from UC Irvine. Dan Cameron, who's a faculty member here on campus, is one of the faculty members on it. I'm fortunate that I get to serve for the first 2 years of the council. My staff and co-chair a group of people across the 10 campuses that work on the climate programs, and so we're there also kind of being able to have that perspective. And there's a very small website about the initiative up. You can search for it, but then we are going to be filling that out with some more information. It's a long, but if you just do a search, you'll find it. Carbon neutrality, UC. You'll get there. So next steps here on campus, we are looking at how we're going to, what measures we can take in the short run and the longer run to reduce our emissions down to kind of net zero. And we're looking at ways to do deeper energy efficiency in our lab buildings and ways to start ramping up our biogas purchases and also sort of look at our infrastructure in a really different way. Like how do we heat and cool the campus in a really different way than we do today, thinking about it, not what we're going to do in 5 years, but what does that system need to look like in 20 or 30 years from now. So I think with that, I will just take some questions if there are any, or fill in some blanks.
Questions for Kaka? Sarah,
Thank you for coming. My first question is kind of like, since we know based on just the data that you presented that we're not close to getting to kind of UConn's goal, what are we doing, or kind of like what is the office doing as a whole to really
Thank you. So in a way, we're looking at the next 11 years in kind of two chunks. What do we do in the next 5 to 6 years, and then what do we do in the following 5 to 6 years? So kind of in the first phase of what we're looking at, we're kind of doing somewhat of what kind of a campus focus on it. What energy efficiency have we done that's been successful? Where else can we do it? How can we institute new technologies like LED lighting, which we haven't yet, lighting controls, meeting new state standards, going into research labs, which we have not done that much work in yet, where we do use a lot of energy. What are some of the things we can do with equipment, with air changes, various things. So we're really trying to get a much more sophisticated look at energy efficiency. The other thing the campus is starting to look at, and this is a part of a planning phase in the next 3 to 5 years, is what are we going to do to heat the campus? We have a cogeneration plant on campus. It's natural gas. In kind of the world of power plants, it's fairly efficient because it produces both electricity and steam, but it's very old. It's mid-1980s vintage. And so we're starting to look at what does that next system need to be, and looking at a phased approach to bringing that in. We're also looking at how we are going to be using natural gas in the short run. We're using it in the cogeneration plant. We use it in boilers. What is the market for biogas? Can we secure it at a rate that we're assuming, at least initially, is going to be more than we're paying for natural gas, but how can we move into that market effectively? So that's kind of the campus approach. Then to kind of make that leap in the renewable energy, we're really looking to how we can do it as a system. So as a system, we have the ability, and they're already starting to look at this, how can we go out and do kind of large biogas procurement as a system? How can we develop, maybe find a landfill in another state that hasn't been capped yet for methane capture? How can we develop, how can we get into that? The other piece of it, which is how can we buy electricity that's greener? So rules about utilities and electricity are really complex in the state, but we have an opportunity for some of the campuses right now to kind of form kind of a wholesale power purchasing, so that we can go out and procure more renewable energy more quickly than the utilities. UC Berkeley does have access to that wholesale power group, but only for a very small part of our electricity. So we're going to be working on ways to do that. And that's not the only thing. We're not just going to be looking to UC for those kind of large leaps. We're going to also look at other opportunities that are going to come along. Perhaps the utility can provide us better electricity or greener electricity sooner. Maybe there's community choice in the area that we can look at. So we're trying to keep kind of all options on the table. I will say that, you know, this is very challenging. There was no money associated with this initiative coming from the Office of the President. We're going to have to move forward kind of really in a financially responsible way. We're trying to, building business cases around it. Where can we save money through energy efficiency, and then how can we start spending money on renewable energy? The solar projects we're going to be moving forward with on campus, we're doing those in a way that are going to, the campus doesn't have to put any capital out for them. We're going to buy the solar electricity, and we're going to, in some cases, pay less than we're paying to the utility. So we're looking for those options, and when they are, we want to be ready to move on them.
Senator Gordon?
Thanks for coming. You pretty much answered my question, so this is more of a comment. My question was going to be, how is this all financed? It's not, apparently. So my comment is just to urge you, as it sounds that CalCap is probably already knows, to not burden students with the financial responsibility for this. And I'm glad to hear that a lot of the ideas you have are actually of lower cost than what we're using. So I look forward to hearing about what you're doing. Just a comment to try not to financially burden students.
Yeah, thank you for that comment. That's a really important message to hear from you, and to also relay to people make the financial decision makers.
Senator DeSalle?
While noticed on your slide that in the reduction strategies of the 5, divestment was not in any of them, or I believe. And since fossil fuels and the dependence on the industry is such a large part of our carbon emissions, why haven't we pushed for divestment as of yet?
Just so I have clarification, an estimate for the emissions that are associated with the fossil fuel that it's being invested in through investment, that evaluation?
Yeah, since it's part of the larger UCOP system.
So I want to say two things. One thing that when we talk about carbon neutrality under this initiative, like I said, it's a piece, we're just looking at a piece of what it is right now. And that does not mean that we shouldn't be looking at everything. And so I still think that that message needs to be made. And it's being made from different angles, not just from your question around divestment, but we are also asking, okay, so we're looking at building energy use. What about our impacts from transportation? Are we looking at a life cycle analysis for what we're procuring? I mean, there's a lot of activities that we do that have carbon-related emissions that we can make choices on. I'm not avoiding your question, but I'm coming back to it. So I am not aware either of an evaluation done on the emissions impacts associated with our investments. I think that would be that would actually be a very important question to ask UCOP to answer that piece on it. I think with the Global Climate Leadership Council, you've got people that are now focused on it, and you've got some really great thinkers and faculty in there that understand these things that might be able to help mobilize that kind of evaluation. So in my capacity, I will relay that back to the staff, staff at the Global Council, but I also do encourage those people that have an interest to make a connection with the students as well that are on the Global Council.
Thank you again. My last question is kind of like a three-part question, so bear with me. But first off is this kind of derails a little, but what does the Office of Sustainability think about the development of the Gill Track Plan? And then on that, do you think that paving over urban agriculture will solve the global food initiative? And then how do you see those two kind of be remedied? And then what are you doing to kind of support efforts to kind of stop the development?
I have to say that I'm probably not the best person from the Office of Sustainability to respond to that. It's an issue that I really have not been involved in or asked to respond to. I do know that within real estate services, which is a big division on campus, that I have heard that they are working on a framework and some programmatic and policy ways to kind of evaluate how we use land on campus and a process for asking for a shift in that. But other than that kind of response, I'm not really the best person. It is something I can take back to the director to see if she has a response that she can provide.
Who would be the best person to contact? Do you have a name?
Well, I would actually say perhaps not the Office of Sustainability, but if you did want to speak to somebody in the office, it would be Lisa McNeely, who's the Director of Sustainability and Energy, would be the place to start.
Thank you.
Senator Berger, and I'd like to entertain a motion to accept that next one. Any questions? Motion passes.
Hi, Kara. Thank you so much for coming tonight. I really appreciate it. We've been getting a lot of pushback from both Lillian's office and a little bit from Office of Sustainability, actually, both on Gill Tract and Sustainable Landscape. I was just wondering if you had any insights on that. I know that's not what you're talking about with carbon neutrality, but we're just trying to get insight on what's going on, because I feel like it does relate a lot to carbon neutrality, both with that and the Global Food Initiative and actually all the Napolitano initiatives right now. Do you have any thoughts on what's going on right now?
I wish I could offer you more insights than I have. I'm do want to respond to, I would say that we don't want to be creating a situation where we feel like there's a pushback or silence, where we're creating a dialogue and we can maybe come up with some solutions that will work. I don't know, I can't speak for this for certain. Perhaps maybe some of what might be perceived as silence or pushback might just be that there isn't a workable kind of response yet or framework to discuss. Like I said, I'm not aware of the details. My understanding is that there has been some dialogues opened up and some meetings that at least have started to happen or not. Well, I guess I would maybe like to frame a question back. Is there something that you think that I might be able to help facilitate opening that up?
Yeah, basically we've just been trying to get a meeting with the Vice Chancellor of Real Estate to discuss sustainable landscape, but also trying to figure out kind of what's going on with sustainable landscape development projects that have been happening around campus. So the one that's just started by the RSF and the other one kind of by, I forget where it is. But we're trying to figure out just exactly where these new areas are, and there's been some kind of silence or resistance to telling us what those spots are, so I just feel like there's kind of a lack of transparency in what's going on campus already, and then how we can get involved, because we've sent a couple proposals over to the office and also to Lisa, and heard back basically nothing, and it's been since August, so.
I'll tell you what I will do. I don't know if I can change the lack of response, but I will certainly go back and inquire as to whether somebody can respond or see if there can be some movement on that for you. And I'll be in touch. I will be back in touch with you. Thank you. Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you.
Thanks.
So our next guest is UCPD.
So what do we do when someone decides not to show up for the third time?
Right, so I was going to write an entry regardless, but if I could get a show of hands as to an approval that I can speak on behalf of the Senate and how frustrated you all are as well, that would be
Also, not everyone's here, so I'm going to be my second here now. Yeah, I think it's already.
Cool. I'll make sure that message gets across. Next on the agenda is executive officer reports for 5 minutes and 5 minutes of questions. First we have presenting
Alright, I'll go really quickly through the less juicy stuff. For our insurance for the ASUC, we were denied by the first people, so we're going back out to the market to look for more. 2 search committees that have been happening. The AD of Finance within the student union, who's, the Director of Administration in the student union, who's taking over like John Sprague's position. That search is happening currently. There is also the Associate Director for the Student Government Advising Leadership Development Team that I and Brianna sit on from the undergrad side, as well as 2 grad students. Both of those searches are going, and they will be kind of wrapping up within the next 2-3 weeks, so that's exciting. Other interesting things, the faculty member for the student union board said he's not interested, so we're going back out looking for more people. There's a lot of things happening in the student union board related to the opening of the new building, but then the most interesting thing that's happening is I just came back from a meeting with UCOP, and they have announced, or they will announce to the regents tonight, so it hasn't been shown to the regents, but tonight they're going to give the regents a packet of 5% capped, which means it can't be higher than 5%, but potentially could be less than 5% for the next 5 years tuition increases. So this will be voted on in 2 weeks at the regents meeting. So council presidents, along with UCSA, had a meeting the UCSA board chair, Kevin Sabo. I'm going to yield some time at the end of my discussion so that he can give his perspective on what happened. Some notable things to take away from the conversation, I'm sure you'll have questions. Some notable things are they seem really interested in putting together like this media plan working with students. This was kind of what I wanted going into the conversation, but now I'm realizing that it's probably what they also wanted going into the conversation, because now that means they have a lot of leverage from students to get things. I don't necessarily think that's unilaterally bad, because we do want the same thing, which is more resources, but it's just we need to be very cognizant of that moving forward. I've already asked to sit on that smaller group. It's going to be 2 people from UCSA, 2 people from Council of Presidents. I've asked to sit on that group, and I've also asked to monitor the correspondence that UCOP is going to have with both the chancellors as well as the regents, so that we can begin to make sure like the messaging that they're going forward with isn't like, this is really good. Because I mean, if you hear it from a campus perspective, I don't want to speak for the chancellor's representatives, and they thought this would be a lot larger conversation today. That's originally why Mills wanted to come in today, was to actually announce this to you all. So we need to, the campus is really looking at this as a benefit, because it means that they have more resources to be able to do things that they need to do on campus. So it's going to require very steady messaging for us to kind of turn that around. So I'm going to yield some time if I'm allowed to do that. Is that possible, Justin? Okay, I'm going to yield the rest of my time for Kevin. And then you can ask us both questions, I believe.
I didn't hear that. What did you say?
Salvo for AG.
Oh, God, never again. I was just thinking that when I came back up here. So, hello everyone again. Thank you, Drew. Tom and I were in about a 2-hour meeting with UCOP, with Jen Napolitano and then some person who works in student services. And they sort of like very brusquely like came in and was like, this is happening. And so what it basically is a pretty politically savvy plan. What they're going to do is, rather than stick to the old plan that Napolitano has been talking about the slow but steady, slow but expected tuition model of the 5544 percentage increase every year, basically they're going to make it so that way every year they'll tell the legislature how much money they want, and if the legislature doesn't do that, they'll raise tuition by like a proportional amount on us. So we've literally become hostages. And they'll go to the legislature in January, or they'll go to, well, firstly the governor, and then the governor will not listen to them because it's Jerry Brown, and then he'll introduce his own budget proposal. And then the legislature will sit there and hear from us during the consultative process up until the May revise, and then by the June adoption. So effectively, they'll say we need this percentage, and they're going to send the numbers today. So basically, there's a 5%, 4%, 3, 2, and 1, and 0% increase numbers. So if they say we want 150 million and we won't raise tuition, if they give anything less than that, it'll trigger a tuition percentage increase up to 5%. So at the very least, they said they'll commit to never raising tuition more than 5% again. But then that also means that potentially every year, Janet Napolitano even said, well, a student could be a first year, and the legislature cannot give us the money, and it'll raise 5% all 4 years. So your tuition can go up by 20% during your entire time here if the legislature doesn't, like, cave into the hostage crisis. So, again, it's very smart on her. It makes the legislature and the governor the bad people if they don't sort of cave into the demands. It sucks for us because we literally have like no say-so in this. So really what's going to happen is at UCSA's board this weekend for SOC, for those of you who are going to SOC, we're going to be having a conversation on how to respond to this. Even though there's a state law called 8970 that says they're supposed to tell us a tuition increase is 30 days in advance, they told us like 14 days in advance. And it was supposed to be a consultation, and it was literally her saying, this is happening, like whether you like it or not. So we're going to be responding in the short term and making sure that the governor and the legislature try to focus our lobbying efforts on getting whatever magic number they give us for this year so that we can keep tuition stagnant. But in the long term, we're going to be organizing internally to work on regent reform and then work on creating, through regent reform, policies that UCOP has to follow as they draft the budget. We have 2 students who are involved in the UC Planning and Budget Committee who were blocked from this conversation. They were told it was for committee members only in closed session, and so the student representatives were literally removed from the process so that way they can sort of talk about this plan. So that's sort of what's on the horizon. In 2 weeks, the 19th meeting, they'll probably be adopting this because they rubber stamped everything she puts on the desks. And so that was the conversation that happened today.
One thing to add is there's this there was an offing of a conversation, which is, let's say it goes up 5%, where does that money go? They wanted to go, they've outlined certain things like faculty to student ratio, development, etc., student services type things, but then they didn't really outline a plan to do it, and we were really describing how it needs to be, we need to have a say in how that money is being used. So that's going to be, Kevin outlined their plan. I think that's going to be the plan from the Student Body Council President's motion, which is just really working with not only UCOP to set out at least a minimum guidelines, but then working with each campus to be essentially creating more shared governance.
Questions for RP? Senator Mill?
Hi.
Hi. I have a question for Pavan. Regarding the technology, your office's technology committee, and moreover, its relationship to mobile apps. So this is something that Conrad as a committee is involved with a lot, but I want to take this opportunity for all senators to put some input on this because I felt like this is something that related to more than just Conrad's boundaries. So regarding the potential of moving point of position regarding technology and their desire to be related to the ASUC and have that clout, but still with autonomous. I know there's discussions about having a veto as an alternative to checks and powers. Could you just maybe talk more about that proposition?
Yeah, so I guess shifting gears. So there's this conversation to create appointed officials. It would be kind of like a chief financial officer, so essentially Dennis's position, a chief technology officer, a chief information officer, which would be the MCD we currently have. Make them executive officers essentially, so they have the clout, they have the ability to talk and act on kind of behalf of the ASUC. There's only the biggest worry was related to the chief technology officer, which was around the room, a lot of senators have come and asked for things to be part of the mobile app, and we love that. It's just a question of capacity as well as feasibility in terms of technological capacity for the app. So one thing that wanted to happen was for the chief technology officer to have do all the reports